Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we have just completed the 2028 amateur draft. Didn't really do anything interesting in the last 11 rounds of the draft, as you might suspect. The big talent we brought on board was in the early stages of the draft. Thanks again for all who shared thoughts on what they would recommend. We ended up having, I think it was 9 or 10 different players recommended, so I was bound to disappoint the vast majority of you with the decision that I ended up going with. But we'll be seeing how that works out and how some of the other players who were popular choices work out in the coming years and hopefully decades if we can keep our job here in Oakland. And I know many of you have been encouraging us in the last few drafts to add some college players to jumpstart this long-standing rebuild a little more quickly. And at some point, we'll probably end up doing that if we stick on the job. But went high school heavy with higher ceilings this time around, trying to do what we think are the right decisions for Oakland for the long term in the draft. That being said, we have made some decisions that we think will help us in the short term as well. We recently promoted, meaning today, so he hasn't even played for us yet, MJ Melendez from AAA into or onto our 26-man lineup. What that meant is that we set Max Muncy back down to AAA where he can play every day. He was only playing regularly against left-handed pitching. He had done fine for us, but feel like Melendez with his bat against right-handed pitching, even as he's almost closing in on 30 years old, draws some walks, should hit some home runs, also gives us a good influence in the clubhouse. He's been very productive in AAA for us this year with a 153 WRC plus, as you might expect. So we're going to give him a chance in the coming weeks in the majors and hope that he can help jumpstart our offense. And we've also made 2 relatively minor trades. We picked up Colby Allard to rejoin our rotation. He was with us a few years ago. Not a big part of our future, but think that he gives us a decent major league arm. And what we ended up doing with bringing Allard on board was make 1 demotion from the bullpen. And then we also made a second trade to bring on Mike Vassell from the Mets organization. Not a guy who is a big-time part of our future, but a acceptable starting pitcher. Honestly, the reason we brought him on board was that he's extremely popular, and we thought that trading for him would give us a boost to our awful fan interest. And unfortunately, it did not do that. The primary pieces we gave up were Hunter Brown, who's similarly aged, honestly a pretty similar pitcher. Could argue that Brown might even be better. He was only 3-6 this year, but did have a 3.62 ERA for us and has been solid since he moved into the rotation. But he was looking for about $6.5 million next year when he'll be 30 years old, while Vassell next year is looking to be making about $5 million at this point, so potentially save a little bit of money. But really, as I said, the main driver was it to try to boost fan interest, and unfortunately that failed. Not really exactly sure why. We also gave up the minor league center fielder Jorge Ruiz. You may remember we picked him up in a trade a little over a year ago, I think. But just didn't see him having a big spot in our future. And also had to give a couple of spare parts from the minor league organization, as well as Malachi Knight, who's not a big-time prospect. So I think Vassell hopefully will at least be with us next year. So from that perspective, he's more valuable than Brown. But again, kind of disappointed because we brought him on board specifically to try to boost fan interest, given he's extremely popular. And unfortunately, we're still stuck at 37, which is even lower than we started this season at. We've also made one offer for a very mediocre free agent who happens to be extremely popular, and maybe we'll get a small boost from that going forward. But we've got about a week now until the All-Star game. The A's have been playing a bit better of late, but at 39 and 54, we are still having a decidedly mediocre season. And I don't know if it has to do with our minimal fan loyalty or our tiny fan market size or some combination of both. But we did just sign Luke Weaver to a major league contract, and he is another guy who is very popular, not extremely popular, but that was as good as was available on the free agent market. Also a fan favorite, so we thought that might improve fan interest for us a little bit, but unfortunately that is not the case. So just more disappointment as we try to do anything to encourage this franchise to develop. We've cut our ticket prices pretty low. We do have an owner goal this year to get attendance over 21,000 a game. Thought that those moves that we made to bring on a couple of popular players might at least help us hit that goal. And we also did kind of hope that the deal we made for Vassell might help us in terms of our owner goal to acquire a top player. Not that he is a top player, but in the context of our team and who we brought on board, someone has to be the top player that we brought on board, but I guess that's not the way it works. But definitely frustrating that we can't seem to do anything to get the financial situation of this team improved. And it's not going to shock me if when we let Weaver leave at the end of this offseason, he ends up costing us some more of the few precious fan interest points that we have, even though bringing him on board didn't help us at all. And although we lost 3 out of 4 in our series against the Mariners at home, after previously losing 3 out of 4 when that homestand began against Kansas City, we did salvage the final 3 games of the homestand, sweeping the White Sox. So as we head into the 2028 All-Star break, we are 43 and 56, 14 games behind in the division. You can see Mr. Endo tied for second in the league in homers at the All-Star break. Batting average down to 206, though, as he is steadily heading towards the Mendoza line. Still striking out in just under 50% of his at-bats. But he still has put up a 116 WRC+. So certainly one of our more valuable offensive players. And Kyle Bradish leading the league in ERA. That was a bit of a surprise after he put up 5.89 and 6.47 ERAs each of the last 2 years in Baltimore. Certainly doesn't have a profile that would suggest he's going to keep performing at that level, but we'll take it while he's doing it. And Chase Lee is second in the American League in with 27 saves. So we have some individual seasons that are pretty decent at this point, but the overall results at 43 and 56 are not that impressive. Bradish, not surprisingly, leading the league in ERA, is named an all-star for our Oakland A's. Kyle Nelson, who we picked up in an off-season trade with the Cubs, 4-1 with a save and a 2.05 ERA, 59 strikeouts in 57 innings, also makes the all-star team for Oakland as a middle reliever. Not surprisingly, none of our offensive players make the 2028 American League All-Star team, but with 2 All-Stars this year, that's double the number that we've typically had in this playthrough thus far. I'm grasping at anything resembling progress in pure desperation. And as we head into the final week of July and prepare for the trade deadline, we did take 2 out of 3 at Texas coming out of the All-Star game. Only 6 games left before the trade deadline. We got a 3-game series in LA against the Dodgers. Then we'll be at home for 3 against Houston and back on the road in the division at the Angels on July 31st, a week from today. So we're going to keep perusing the trade deadline. Certainly not expecting this team to compete for a playoff spot. It's really just a matter of hopefully ensuring that at the very least we accomplish our goal of not sucking completely, because it increasingly looks like we're unlikely to hit any of the other goals that we have this current season. And unfortunately, the attendance goal for this year is very high priority. We cut the prices, but we're not putting many more people into the seats. And as I talked about, we've been trying to improve fan interest, which will also hopefully have an impact on attendance. Traded for an extremely popular player, signed as a free agent, a very popular player, and didn't move the needle at all with either of those moves, unfortunately. And we've been looking hard to see if there's anything we can do in trade to improve this team and have not had much luck. We lost both of the games in Los Angeles, not surprisingly. Lost the first game of the homestand against Houston, but did end up taking the final 2 to at least win that series. Got this game in Los Angeles against the Angels later tonight, but we'll see if perhaps there's a trade for us to make before we get to that point. And as we prepare for the trade deadline, if we win today against the Angels, we'll have a second consecutive winning month. So we have made a bit of progress with this team. At 47-60, we're still 2 games below our Pythagorean expectations. Runs scored, 13th. The offense generally bad, mediocre in a couple of categories, walks and strikeouts. The pitching has been excellent, 4th in the American League in runs allowed. Both our starters ERA and our bullpen ERA also rank 4th. And you can see we're in the top handful of a lot of pitching categories in the American League. And we're also 2nd in defensive efficiency and 2nd in zone rating. So we've got good pitching and good defense. We are just, as we have often been throughout this playthrough, struggling mightily to score runs. And I have found one trade that we've made that we liked. We sent Michael Conforto, who was in our minor league system, to the Cubs for Jordan Romano, and they're retaining most of Romano's contract. So that makes him a decent reliever for us, and we have him penciled into a stopper role for us, so it'll certainly help our already good pitching staff. Doesn't feel like there's really anything for us to do to help our offense as much as I'd like to, since we're not really a true contender. There is an interesting minor league trade that we just had presented to us. We shopped Jacob Misiorowski, who we ended up demoting a couple of weeks ago. He had been pretty brutal. His control, one report that we had, was actually a 35. You can see we think it's back up to 40 now, but still just allowing a ridiculous number of walks despite his excellent strikeouts. So we were shopping him, and most of the offers weren't interesting, but if we include Romano with Misiorowski, we can get Esteban Meza, who is a third baseman in the Rockies organization. He was a scouting discovery last December. but looks like he could be a pretty interesting third baseman. Love the glove. Think he could be a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. And his bat looks borderline interesting. He's only hit 220 in rookie ball this year, but he's also only 16 years old. So I'm intrigued by him. We only have an average scouting report on him, so he may be different than we think he looks. Probably not as good. I'd give Misiorowski for him in a second, even though he's younger. Even though we've got Romano locked up for the next season in 2 months with very minimal financial commitment. He is a 35-year-old, and we're not a win-now team. I'd love to find a way to do this deal without having to give up Romano. But I think if I have to give up Romano, I still would do it. Because Meza just gives us another solid young piece that maybe develops into something useful down the line. Misiorowski, I'm never going to like him because of his lack of control. And Romano would be a good reliever for us for the next season and a half. I mentioned we have him penciled into the stopper role, but let's be honest, we're 47 and 60. We really don't need a 35-year-old stopper. And we did end up getting a trade done for the minor league third baseman Esteban Meza. Not a top 100 prospect, but again, I like the glove. If the bat develops, he could certainly be a useful major league player. I mean, if the bat completely develops, he's a pretty good third baseman. So take a flyer on him. We had to give up Misiorowski, who is a valuable asset, but just not the type of asset I like with his inability to control his pitches. We had to give Tommy Edman, who is in our minor league system, and also Miles Naylor, who is a decent outfield prospect, made it to AAA this year, does have 21 doubles, 11 homers, but he's only hitting 243. Don't view him as a big-time prospect, so certainly feel like the ceiling on Meza is higher than any of these other players. Gives us a little more youth in the organization, and we did not have to let go of Mr. Romano, who will be a very cost-effective and hopefully highly performing reliever for us for the next season and a half. And we made it past the trade deadline to August 1st. We did lose a one-run game at the Angels, so we aren't going to end up with a winning record for 2 months in a row, but we're flat at 500 for the month of July. Of course, the day after we don't trade Romano, the 35-year-old gets an updated scouting report, and his control and his movement have both fallen off immediately after we acquired him. Did give us a perfect inning in his first outing with us yesterday. Still think that he can help us, and as I said, we're not on the hook for much of his contract at all, so he will be a cost-effective arm out of our bullpen. Taking a look at the team stats here, obviously not too much is going to have changed, but 26 and 25 over the last 2 months after that brutal start. Haven't really done anything to help the offense. We actually have helped on the margin, probably the pitching staff a bit. So we'll see how these final 2 months of the season go. We're not a serious contender by any stretch of the imagination at 47 and 61. We are 10.5 out of a wild card, and there are a lot of teams much closer to the wild card than we are, so it's not realistic to think that we're going to compete to be in the playoffs this year. You can see that our friend Mr. Hidero Endo has just dropped off of the home run leaderboard. Check in his statistics here. And the batting average is now below the Mendoza line at $197. WRC plus down to 106. does have 25 homers and 60 ribbies and still has put up a 1 WAR over the course of the year. But the batting splits are frighteningly disappointing, as I don't know if the pitchers are just getting used to him or it was just a very hot start for him in the month of April, but the batting averages have dipped from 244 to 214 to a $176 to a $156 this past month. To be fair, his BABIP this past month was a sickly 205, so hopefully that will get better going forward, because after a nice start to the season, he's basically been a replacement level player these last couple of months, which is of course when we've moved him up in our batting order and started to actually think that we might be counting on him for some consistent offense. And with that, we will call it an episode. We'll be back next time around to sim through August and September and see how we ultimately end up doing with our owner goals. We're doing okay in terms of not sucking completely. We're making a small amount of progress with our lower ticket prices on improving attendance, although we're not going to get to that 21,000. We haven't acquired a top player, and we still don't have any international amateurs who have done anything for us. So probably going to be another series of uncomfortable conversations with Mr. Fisher when we get to the off season, but we'll see if we can win a few more games. Would certainly love to have a higher winning percentage this year than we did a year ago when all is said and done, and we're going to need to play better over the last couple months of the season for that to happen, and we'll find out how we do with that in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.